And as we celebrate the man who waited decades to be a monarch, spare a thought for his grandson, 11-year-old Prince George. He's already had to grow up fast, mourning the loss of his great-grandmother, Queen Elizabeth, and his mum, Princess Kate, recovering from cancer.
After nearly a decade of loyal service, Prince George's longtime nanny has been suddenly fired, and the royal family is scrambling as her shocking revenge begins to unfold. Known for her quiet dedication and behind-the-scenes role in raising the future king, no one expected her exit to turn into a full-blown royal scandal. But now, explosive claims, private recordings, and secret royal routines are leaking into the public eye. What pushed her to the edge? And how did her stunning retaliation leave Buckingham Palace in total chaos? This is the royal drama you didn't see coming. Where it all began. The perfect start of a royal bond. She was never meant to be the star. From the very beginning, Maria Teresa Turrion-Borrallo stepped into a world that prized invisibility over fame. Before anyone knew her name, or noticed the crisp brown Norland uniform, Maria had already been trained for a role where silence spoke louder than words. Not chosen for wealth or social status, but for her readiness. A kind of readiness that comes from discipline, empathy, and years of mastering how to serve without ever being seen. That story begins at Norland College, the elite British institution where nannies aren't just trained. They're transformed. Imagine a school where students learn not only how to swaddle infants and prepare meals, but also how to detect danger in a crowded room and vanish into the background like shadows.
These are among the most exclusive and highly trained nannies in the world.
Ready, here we go.
They learn self-defense and advanced driving techniques, and even their cooking skills are a cut above.
We're sort of training a league of super nannies.
Norland is where loyalty, strength, and subtlety meet. And Maria, a proud daughter of Spain with deep family values and quiet strength, stood out in a place filled with excellence. Her mix of calm discipline and deep warmth was unmistakable. She was a woman who could raise a child and never steal the spotlight. That made her perfect for royalty. When Prince William and Catherine searched for someone to help guide their firstborn through the maze of royal life, they weren't simply hiring help. They were handing over trust, something fragile, sacred, and rare. Maria passed every test. Background checks, psychological reviews, endless interviews. But more than that, she embodied the one thing no resume could capture: selflessness. She didn't flinch when the cameras came close. She didn't seek attention. She was there only for the child, only for George. Her job came with invisible rules, unspoken codes about when to speak, when to vanish, when to feel, and she followed them with precision. Emotional control wasn't a suggestion, it was a standard. You could love the child, but you always had to be ready to let go. For 9 years, Maria lived inside those boundaries, becoming an essential part of Prince George's life. Yet almost no one outside the palace knew her name. That was her magic. Her presence brought calm. Her absence left no trace. But inside those nursery walls, she was everything. She gave him structure, peace, and a gentle rhythm in a world built on protocol and pressure. Maria made royal life feel normal, for a child born into anything but. Until one day, the role she'd mastered was stripped away without warning. Now, let's step inside those quiet palace walls and uncover the unseen rhythm of her daily world. Stay close. Raising a prince? The untold life behind palace walls. Being a nanny to a royal child isn't just about keeping a schedule or reading bedtime stories. It's about becoming part of a hidden world with rules few outsiders will ever understand. The moment Maria Teresa Turrion-Borrallo stepped through the doors of Kensington Palace, everything about her presence said, steady. She wasn't flashy. She didn't seek praise. But from day one, she brought something rare to Prince George's life: quiet, thoughtful structure. Every part of George's day had a rhythm under Maria's care. Breakfast wasn't just served, it was served simultaneously every morning. His books were lined up on the shelf in the order he liked, and his clothes were folded just the way he preferred. These tiny details may seem small, but to a child as sensitive as George, they meant the world. The change made him pause. Even small differences made him whisper, "Wow," with wide eyes. Maria understood that early. She didn't disrupt his routine unless necessary. She once told a fellow staff member, "He likes knowing what comes next," which became her rule. But Maria offered more than comfort. She gave magic. On George's second birthday, the official photos captured a beaming little boy. What they didn't show was Maria just outside the frame, waving a plush toy and whispering silly words in Spanish. He grinned because she was there. After all, he trusted her completely. She wasn't just the person who made his food or cleaned up his toys. She was his calm in a chaotic world. Inside the palace, Maria followed the rules. No gossip, no interviews, no mistakes. But within the nursery walls, something warmer took root. She wasn't a parent, but she became a quiet anchor, a steady hand, a soft word, a presence George instinctively looked for when he was upset. She understood him in a way that didn't require noise or commands. Her world stayed small, yet her role was massive. As George grew, Maria adjusted. One day, after a rough morning, he stomped into the nursery and folded his arms. Maria crouched beside him and asked gently, "Are you frustrated or just tired?" He looked at her and tried, "Frusted?" She smiled. That moment gave him language for feelings most children can't name. She wasn't just raising him. She was teaching him how to exist in a world that would never stop watching him. When George asked why strangers waved at his car, Maria didn't spin a royal fairy tale. She replied, "Because they care about your family. Seeing you makes them smile." And when he asked whether other kids had rooms like his, she didn't dodge the truth. "No," she said gently. "Not all children do." These weren't scripted palace lessons. They were small, honest moments of learning, the kind that build character, not just knowledge. Maria shared pieces of her culture with George too. Words like gracias and buenos dias became their quiet code. On some mornings, he would tiptoe into her room and whisper, "Wendes, Maria," proud of remembering. Her lullabies, her patience, her gentle corrections, they became part of who he was. He didn't just learn from her. He became safe in her world. By the time George turned 5, Maria's role was far more than professional. She was his refuge. That night, after a grand birthday party with cameras and guests, Maria quietly waited with homemade cupcakes and a wrapped toy. "Did you make these?" he asked. She replied, "Always." Maria built a world for George where he could simply be a boy. No royal titles, no expectations, just sticks from the garden, puzzles on rainy days, and soft goodnights by the fire. But even in the quietest bonds, change eventually knocks. But what does it feel like when that change becomes more than subtle? When the quiet support system you've always known starts to fade? That's exactly what unfolded next. Raising royalty. The quiet exit begins. By the time Prince George turned 7, the soft edges of childhood had begun to fade. His nursery no longer looked like the cozy space it once was. The baby blankets were gone, replaced with shelves of adventure books, puzzles, and toy airplanes. It was clear George was growing into his own. And as always, Maria adjusted. She didn't choose his clothes anymore. She laid out options and let him decide. Instead of guiding him into a room, she now walked beside him. The change was subtle, but it was happening. George wanted to do things for himself. Tie his tie, pack his school bag, pick out his snacks for outings. His questions also changed. One evening, after a royal event with Catherine, George asked softly, "Do all kids have beds?" Maria hesitated. "No," she replied gently. His quiet response said more than words ever could. He was starting to think beyond himself, to feel the world. Maria, as always, followed his lead. She gave him space, but never strayed too far. She still made his favorite meals, helped with homework when invited, and kept her presence steady, yet subtle. Sometimes he'd surprise her with a crumpled little note. One word, gracias. But Maria could sense something shifting. The palace felt busier, more advisors, more structure. Conversations were happening behind closed doors about politics, history, and responsibility. Her place in those conversations? Non-existent. The warm, familiar rhythm of her role was slipping away. Let's now delve into the meeting that led to her being fired. What exactly went on behind closed palace doors that day? Stay with us. The quiet goodbye. Maria's final day with Prince George. Maria had always known this day would come. Still, when the moment finally arrived, it struck her deeper than she'd imagined. One quiet morning, she was called into a private meeting. Not dramatic, not emotional, just calm and heavy with meaning. Inside the room stood Prince William and Princess Catherine, their faces gentle, their words carefully chosen. They thanked her for everything, for the years of care, patience, and love she had given their son. "You've helped shape the boy he's become," Catherine said, her voice steady with gratitude. But then came the line Maria had silently prepared for all these years. "He's entering a new stage now," William added. "And he doesn't need a nanny." In the same way, there was no blame, no discomfort, only a respectful goodbye masked in formal language. Still, Maria's heart sank. Not from shock, but from the quiet ache of knowing her time as George's daily companion was coming to an end. As she walked upstairs, the air felt heavier. George was by the window, sketching as he often did. When he saw her, he stood up. "Mum told me," he said softly, eyes searching hers. "I don't want things to change." Maria knelt beside him and offered a small, reassuring smile. "You're growing up, and it's time," she whispered. He didn't cry, but he didn't smile either. That shared silence, pure and raw, would echo in her memory long after words faded. That night, Maria began to pack. She didn't take much, just the pieces that held real meaning. A small stack of books, a framed picture George had drawn when he was 5, and a worn notebook filled with stories and reflections she never shared with anyone. Her hands moved slowly, as though touching each memory one last time. The following morning, she walked George to breakfast as she always had. They sat in their usual spot, everything looking just the same, though everything had changed. George slid a small wrapped gift across the table. Inside was a leather notebook. On the first page, written in his careful handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for being my first teacher." Maria didn't cry, but something inside her shifted. The kind of shift that only comes when you realize a chapter is truly over. She left the palace that afternoon through the back stairs, the same ones she had used every morning for nearly 10 years. No press releases, no cameras, no formal farewell. Just quiet steps and a heavy heart. The world wouldn't notice her departure, but for one little boy, everything had changed. Maria never begged to stay. That wasn't her way. She exited with grace, carrying only what mattered: a drawing, a small stuffed animal from a trip to Scotland, and the notebook George had given her. Her goodbye wasn't loud. It was quiet, personal, and full of love. The silence she left behind said more than any speech ever could. But did Maria truly disappear into the background? Or did she step into something even more unexpected? Stay with us as we explore the quiet aftermath. quiet hands, lasting echoes. Maria's life beyond the palace. When Maria stepped away from Kensington Palace, she didn't rush to replace the life she left behind. There were no newspaper exclusives, no teary sit-down interviews, and certainly no dramatic tell-all memoirs. Instead, she disappeared into something much more unfamiliar: stillness. She found a modest flat tucked into a quiet corner of West London. It wasn't lavish, just peaceful. The royal corridors had been replaced by silent mornings and the occasional clinking of a kettle in her tiny kitchen. Gone were the packed routines, the endless schedules, the lullabies whispered in dimly lit rooms. Now her days began with no plan at all. It was disorienting at first. She would wake instinctively at 5:30 a.m., still expecting the shuffle of little footsteps or the buzz of a palace assistant confirming the day's itinerary. But there was only silence. And for the first time in years, Maria let that silence linger. "Let the stillness teach you," she scribbled into her notebook one morning. This wasn't her falling apart, it was her catching up. Her heart had spent years following someone else's pace. Now she was finding her own. From time to time, the palace sent her updates. They were formal, even distant. One note said George was adjusting well to his new schedule, new tutors. Another message arrived with a small package, a forgotten cardigan, and a crumpled drawing of a dog. No note, just the items. She opened the parcel slowly, pressed the sketch to her chest, and whispered, "Gracias." Not sadness, just acceptance. A quiet nod to a life she'd loved and let go of. She stayed away from the spotlight. No one-night interviews, no veiled stories in tabloids. Her silence wasn't secretive, it was sacred. George's childhood wasn't a story to share, it was a memory she guarded, a treasure, not a tale. Still, she didn't isolate. She visited former classmates at Norland College, sat with retired nannies over tea, and listened more than she spoke. Her answer was simple and heartfelt when asked if she missed George. Then, 3 months later, came a call she never expected. The palace. George was preparing for his first major public trip, and he wanted her there, just for a week. No fuss, no headlines. Maria returned the way she always had, through the back gate. George greeted her, taller, more grown up, but with the same spark in his eyes. They reviewed his routine together, just like old times. Before she left, he handed her a folded paper. On the train ride home, she opened it. Another dog, this one labeled Marta. No explanation, just a quiet token of love. A drawing from a prince to the woman who raised him when the cameras were off. Most assumed that was the end, but Maria had something left to give. She didn't seek revenge the way tabloids fantasize. Her version was much more powerful. With quiet resolve, she created something new, a support program for retired and transitioning nannies. She named it Quiet Hands, borrowing the phrase she used whenever George grew overwhelmed. "Quiet hands, George," she would whisper. It meant calm, control, peace. Now it meant healing. The program became a haven, offering workshops, mentoring, and a place to be understood. Not many knew of her royal past. She never mentioned titles, but the way she listened, the way she knew, it was obvious. One young nanny said, "She speaks like someone who lived through something beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time." Maria had become a quiet force for those who once stood in the shadows of power. Her goodbye had not been an end. It was a door quietly opened for others. As we step into the next chapter, we'll take a closer look at whether the palace may have made a costly mistake. Stay tuned. The royal ripple effect. How Maria's quiet departure changed everything. After Maria quietly stepped away from royal life, the Cambridge household officially moved forward. New tutors and advisors stepped in. guiding George's everyday life with a sharper focus on preparing him for the throne. His public duties multiplied. More speeches, more formal appearances. He stood taller, smiled politely, and said all the expected words. Yet those who truly knew him noticed something subtle had changed. The bright spark that once lit up private moments seemed to fade just a little behind the palace's grand walls. Whispers started circulating. Had the transition happened too quickly? Had George lost something precious when Maria left? She wasn't just any staff member. She had been his steady guide and emotional anchor. One palace aide reportedly said, "It's like the warmth of the nursery vanished the moment she walked out." This wasn't a failure of the new team. Rather, it was the impossible standard Maria set. A quiet, deep, soulful presence that couldn't easily be replaced. In public, George remained composed, but in private, he still held on to her memory. He was spotted carrying that familiar leather notebook, the one she gifted him, filled with notes and stories. He didn't need to speak her name. The silence around it spoke volumes. Like any child missing the one who first taught him how to feel safe, he found his own way to visit her memory. William and Catherine never expressed regret. Their decision was made with reason and love. But the emotional truth, the part that saw George's newfound seriousness, must have wondered if letting go of someone who became family was truly the right choice. Because when that person shapes a child's soul, it's not just a change, it's a quiet loss, a legacy beyond service. Maria's enduring impact awaits. Let's take a final look at the mark. Maria left not in headlines, but in hearts. Stay with us. The quiet legacy, how Maria's silent influence shaped a future king. Maria never wore a crown, and she never needed one. Her legacy wasn't built on titles or grand gestures. It was quietly woven into the small, precious moments she shared with Prince George. From his very first steps to the bedtime songs she softly sang, and even the whispered Spanish words that only they understood. Maria's impact lived in these simple, intimate connections. While the world saw George as the future king, she saw him as a child, learning how to walk, to feel, and to love. That's where her greatest influence truly lay, quietly shaping a young boy's heart behind the golden walls of royalty. Even long after she left Kensington Palace, her presence lingered. Teachers at George's school noticed something special about him. "He's very kind," one remarked. "He notices when someone's upset." This wasn't something taught in textbooks or royal lessons. It came straight from Maria's years of patient care. She was the one who gently asked, "Are you sad or just tired?" She helped George understand and name his emotions instead of hiding them, showing him that strength could be gentle and love could be quiet. At home, George still asked many of the same questions he once turned to Maria to answer. Why do people wave at us? Do all children go to school? Who decides who's in charge? But now, the voice that answered was different. Maria's voice had become part of his thoughts. Even in her absence, she continued to teach and guide him. She held a quiet place in the heart of a boy growing into a man. Maria's legacy was never meant for the public eye. That was her true gift. Working away from the spotlight, her influence was far more powerful because it was private, rooted in love and trust. She wasn't just George's nanny. She was the voice he would carry forward long after the world forgot her name. As George steps further into his royal role, that voice inside him reminds him, "You were loved deeply, quietly, and forever." Now, as the world watches Prince George grow, the most important part of this story isn't how Maria left, but what she left behind. A simple drawing, a leather-bound notebook, a way of seeing the world, and above all, a childhood no crown could ever buy. 6 months after Maria's departure, her role was officially marked complete. she received a final, handwritten note from the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. Warm, sincere, filled with gratitude. She read it once, then quietly tucked it away beside George's drawing of a dog in her drawer. No tears, no grand emotion, just a soft breath, a quiet acceptance. The chapter was closed. But for Maria, some chapters never truly end. She continued mentoring other nannies, guiding them with wisdom from her own experience, always without boasting about her years with George or the palace itself. Every lesson she shared was born from those quiet moments behind palace walls, from knowing what it means to leave before you're ready. Letting go, she once told a new nanny, doesn't mean forgetting. It means believing your love still matters, even when you're not there. And she was right. George, often seen more mature and poised in public, still carries the memory of the woman who first helped him understand the world. He never needed to speak her name. Her influence was already part of him. Maria's goodbye wasn't loud or dramatic. It was the kind of farewell that stays with you, showing up in the quiet moments when no one is watching. For George, it will always be that way. Real goodbyes don't erase the past. They turn it into something you carry with you. Maria Turion. Baralo may never appear in royal portraits or stand on palace balconies, but her lessons will last far longer than any ceremony. She taught kindness, patience, and quiet strength. Behind every crown and tradition is a child who needs to be seen, heard, and loved. So, what do you think? Did the palace underestimate the power of her role in George's life? Drop your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe.